Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, the Aussie Tax Talk. In last video, we started the Australian residence for tax purpose part 1, which mainly went through the laws and rules in relation to the determination of whether you are a tax resident in Australia or not. Today, we are going to continue on this topic with two extensive case studies. If you, by any chance, missed my last video, please go back and check that one out before continuing on this one. Now, let's start looking into the two examples Simon and Gerhard given by ATO so that we can understand how the rules are in play in real-life scenarios. I will copy the link in the description box in case you are interested to check them out yourself. Simon, a new migrant who changed his mind. Simon migrated from England to Australia with his family on a permanent residency visa. Shortly after arriving in Sydney, he bought a house and secured a job with an accounting firm. The children went to a local private school while his wife took up various leisure activities similar to those that she had been engaged in overseas. Simon still owned an overseas property which the family lived in before migrating to Australia. 4 months after arriving, the family decided that they were unhappy here and returned to England for good. At the time of departure, they were still British citizens, as they did not stay in Australia long enough to qualify for citizenship, even if they had wanted to be naturalized. Although Simon and his family were in Australia for only 4 months, they are considered Australian residents for tax purpose. Their intention of residing permanently in Australia was obvious through their action of obtaining a permanent residency visa, Simon getting a job, the children going to school, his wife engaging in activities that were similar to previous ones, and their purchasing a home and treating it as such. These factors allow the family to satisfy the residency Reside test. Therefore, it's not necessary to consider the statutory tests at all. Hence, they are Australian residents for tax purpose. Gerhard, a new migrant who hasn't quite left his old country. Gerhard migrated from Sweden to Australia with his family. He had to return to Sweden to see out a performance contract that had 2 years to go. He departed 1 month after arriving and settling the family here. In Sweden, he stayed in the family house that they had been living in before moving to Australia. He also retained the family car so that he could travel around for his work in Sweden. He used to play tennis with a local club in Sweden and on his return resumed his association with the club. Although he intends to join his family in Australia for good at the end of his contract, he's leaving his options open in case he is able to secure another contract. In the 9 months that he has been back in Sweden, he has only visited his family in Australia once. From the above factors, Gerhard is a foreign resident for income tax purposes. Let's go through the tests we discussed earlier in our last video. Residency, the Reside test. Although he has a residential home in Australia and his family resides here, these factors are not significant enough. He's not physically present in Australia for a considerable period of the income year, and he intended to return to Sweden after a short stay in Australia. Therefore, he failed the Reside test. The first statutory test, the domicile test. he has not conclusively demonstrated that his domicile of choice is in Australia, and Gerhard's circumstances indicate that he has a permanent place of abode in Sweden. Therefore, he has failed the domicile test. The second statutory test, the 183-day test. He was in Australia for only 1 month, therefore he has failed the 183-day test. The third statutory test, the superannuation fund test. This test doesn't even apply in Gerhard's circumstances. Therefore, by weighing up all the facts and evidences, it was concluded that Gerhard is still a foreign resident for tax purpose. By analyzing the two cases, what information we could take away and apply to our own life? The first major difference is their intention on arrival. Is the intention only for a short-term visit or a long-term migration? Have you fully made up your mind to settle in Australia permanently? If it's a yes, then it's likely to satisfy the common law test, the Reside test. The subsequent change of mind or the period of the stay is irrelevant to this test. Do you just want to have a sip of Australia? If it's a yes, it's likely to fail the Reside test and the other statutory test. Then you will be able to keep the foreign resident status. In these two cases, we need to be fully aware that for Simon, it might be better off becoming a tax resident, as he earned income from his job in Australia, so he will be able to use his tax-free threshold and any other income tax benefit. Whereas with Gerhard, his income is all from overseas sources. It will be much better for him just to keep his foreign resident status so he doesn't need to worry about paying Australian taxes. Another point we want to raise for Simon is since he moved back to UK, he might get tax bill from ATO for his UK income, as he has already satisfied the Australian tax resident test. In this case, it might not be that hard to argue it out, because he only stayed in Australia for 4 months, and all his family moved back with him, with the intention of settling back in UK. But what if, in this case, he stayed for a much longer period, and he just go back by himself instead of moving all his family back? Then it will be a much more complicated scenario, just like the case ZKBN and Commissioner of Taxation 2013 I mentioned earlier. The income of the taxpayer were identified as $116,744 for 2007 income year and $168,635 for 2008 income year, respectively, while the taxpayer was most time being overseas and earning foreign income. That's the scenario we need to be really wary of. While with Gerhard, the critical time we need to be aware of is when he eventually becomes an Australian tax resident. From that onward, his worldwide income is taxed in Australia, including income from Sweden, subject to any double tax agreement. He has already established the family home in Australia, and his family has already settled down in Australia. These connections by themselves, for the moment, are not significant enough to satisfy the residency test. However, if later on he stays longer or his intention starts showing signs of settling down, the conclusion of foreign resident for tax purpose will change accordingly. The longer he stays, the harder to argue against. He's not a tax resident and his intention is merely for a short-term visit. During the period of the future stay, he might have already increased his family ties, the business ties, and social living arrangements as such. Again, it's all about adding every little thing up and looking at the circumstances as a whole and coherently. Last but definitely not the least, I want to share with you a decision-making tool from the ATO website. The link will be down below in the description box. Click on the link, then scroll down the page where it says Access the tool. You will see different options and choose the one that suits you the most, and click on it. The link will take you to the residency calculator. By filling the form step by step, it will tell you whether you are a tax resident or not in the end. This is a simple tool working nicely as a starting point. I do recommend you to seek professional advice for your circumstances, since the law in this area is much more complicated than a simple decision-making tool can tell. Now, it brings us to the end of our today's topic. I hope you enjoyed it, and please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and click on the notification bell so you won't miss my next video. Catch you next time. As usual, it comes to the disclaimer. Taxation determinations will depend on your individual circumstances. This YouTube channel is only for general knowledge sharing purpose. Please do seek professional advice before making decisions. Bye.